Hello, everyone. We're going to be getting started in just a few moments. If you have any questions, feel free to use the questions tab. But again, we'll be getting started just in about 2 or 3 minutes. Hello, everyone. We're going to be getting started in just a moment, letting a few more people sign in, but we'll be starting in about a minute or two here. Alrighty, hello everyone, welcome to the webinar. Thank you for joining us for what promises to be a really fascinating presentation. Before we begin, let's cover some housekeeping items. We will be having a question and answer session at the end of the presentation. If you do have any questions throughout, feel free to submit the questions using the questions function on the right side of your screen. Everyone will receive a copy of the recording after we're finished, using the from the email that they use to register. So if you haven't seen it in the next day, feel free to contact us here at Atlantic. Before we begin, I wanted to introduce the two presenters here today. So my name is Keith Crook. I'll be the moderator for the webinar today, and I'm the Director of Marketing here at Atlantic. Atlantic, if you aren't familiar with us, is an email service provider who specializes in email automation and monetization platforms for mid and large size organizations. Our presentation will be given by John Feist. He's the CEO and co-founder of Email on Acid. Email on Acid provides email testing platforms and spam analysis that make sending the best looking email possible stress-free. So thank you, John, for joining us, and we're excited to hear your presentation.
Well, I'm excited to be here. Thank you.
Excellent. And I think you might still have control there, John.
All right. Yeah. So welcome everyone. And if you find any of this stuff interesting, please feel free to reach out or reach out to me. There's my Twitter handle, NetAtlantic's handle, and email and assets. So let us know if you like it. Let other people know if there's any important things that you guys feel like you learned today. Hopefully you have. And what I want to talk to you guys about is, email accessibility and thinking about this from not just from a day-to-day, from an everyday basis. 'Cause I think a lot of times it's uh, not really thought about, and I can understand because it might not be the sexiest topic. Now with this slide, there's actually kind of rumors going around the office that's me, but that cannot be me because I never had a black and white cat. My cat was only black. So but this was not me in the Skid Row days, and I know that's not the sexy of topics, but it's probably the most important. And the reason why is because it affects a lot of people. And I know marketers out there want to have statistics. And worldwide, it's estimated there's like 330 million people that have some type of visual impairment. And if we're not thinking about that, if we're not taking that into account, we're missing out on a big population. And to put that into perspective, there's 325 million people that live in the United States. So again, a lot of people. Now, if that doesn't really, help solidify like why it's important, people with disabilities, and that can be both permanent or temporary, represent $1 trillion in disposable income. That's a lot of money there, and there's a big market there that we can start to position ourselves to, and to be able to communicate with them just as well as we do with those who don't have some type of impairment. And not to mention too, when we talk about legal perspectives, like the legal side of it, Americans with Disabilities Act. Now, there's nothing really in there right now that specifically talks about digital and ADA compliance. However, it's coming because I don't know if a lot of you guys have heard, there's a lot of legal firms out there or lawyers out there that are specifically targeting college institutions, healthcare providers, all this type of stuff on non-compliance. And because there's some gray area with it, I think it's better to be safe than sorry and to set ourselves up right for the future. And so what are some of those types of disabilities? I really just want to kind of quickly go through some of those for you today. And again, like I mentioned, it can come in all shapes and sizes. They can be physical, they can be visual, and they can also be temporary. I remember one time when I was a kid, my dad was playing softball, and he slid into third base and he broke both of his thumbs. And so he had casts on both of his hands. I think it was like 6 weeks or something. Now, this was obviously way before we had mobile phones and all that type of stuff, but the same type of concept. If I do that, if I break both my thumbs, how am I going to engage with digital? How am I going to engage with my iPhone or my iPad? And once I'm able to, am I able to click on things? Am I easily able to navigate? And some of these examples I'm going to show here are on the visual side. So for example, like low acuity. This is an example of what some would look like to someone if they can't see very clearly. And this is a really good email from a digital agency company called Eroy. They're based in Portland. That little dot that you see there in the middle, that's actually a plus sign. And it's an interactive email, and you click on it, and it gives you more information, more context about daring to be patient and what that means. Now, if I have low acuity, I really can't engage with that. I don't know what it is. Now, could Eroy have done something differently? Maybe. They maybe could have used a different contrast ratio or something to highlight that. However, though, it's just something to be mindful of. And here's another example, ghosting. This is where you don't have that dominant eye, where they're both dominant. So you see like ghosting, like you see two of everything. Now, somebody might say, oh, I've seen that when I was drinking. But seriously, some people see this all the time, and I couldn't imagine going through and visually seeing stuff like that. And cataracts, this is a really very well known and prevalent issue with kind of a visual impairment where you see spots all over the place. And so again, I'm just doing this to kind of show you guys some examples. And I don't know if anyone out there has or knows anyone that has dyslexia, but here's an example of someone who has dyslexia and what it takes and how much concentration it takes to read something. And so I just want you guys to quickly try to read that first sentence. It takes a lot of concentration. And this is just an example of what it's like if someone's dealing with dyslexic and how they read things. And I'll get more into this, like specifically dyslexia, and how you can kind of design things both on landing pages and emails to help make reading easier for someone who has dyslexia. Now, color blindness, really prevalent. Okay, and so here's an example like of just looking at an apple, and if someone can't see those colors, and the three main colors are green, red, and blue, that you can't see. And so just imagine like eating an apple, it almost looks rotten, right, when it's both green and red. And I have a short clip, a short video. And so throughout this presentation, I'm gonna have videos and examples of interpretations. So this next video that I have is all about, it's a 3-minute video clip going into more detail about color blindness and how we can kind of help people with that or help better understand what it's like.
One in 200 women and 1 in 12 men are colourblind. 330 million people worldwide. But red, orange and green are still the universal colours for stop and go, charging and finished, bathroom vacant or bathroom engaged. You will almost certainly know someone who is colourblind, even if they don't. People with mild cases can live for years without realising. They get told off at school for colouring the sky purple, and then go their entire lives assuming they're just thick. But there's really no need. Colour blindness is hereditary. By knowing your genes and your parents, you can understand your kids. Colour blindness is a recessive gene carried on the X chromosome. So to be colourblind, all your X chromosomes need to be affected. Men receive the X chromosome from their mothers and the Y from their fathers. So if their father isn't colourblind, but their mother is a carrier, there's a 50% chance they will receive the affected X chromosome. Women, on the other hand, receive one X from their mother and the other from their father. Again, there's a 50% chance they will receive the affected chromosomes, but because it's recessive, they will only be a carrier. If that woman now has a child with a colourblind man, the sons again will have a 50% chance of being affected, but the daughters will definitely be a carrier, with a 50% chance of being colourblind themselves. If that colourblind daughter starts a family of her own with a non-colourblind man, all her sons will be colourblind, and all her daughters just carriers. If she'd have had a family with a colourblind man though, it's tough luck for any kids, they're all colourblind. The idea that women can't be colourblind is a myth. It's less likely as it has to affect all of your X chromosomes and women have 2 to play with, but it's still very possible. This is one of those myths that colourblind people get questioned about a lot. Most people will have come across Ishihara tests, a pattern of coloured dots that create a number. Colourblind people won't see anything here, but someone with normal colour vision will see 74. If you're thinking, that's ridiculous, it clearly says 21, it's because Ishihara plates can work both ways. You, my friend, probably have due to anomaly. Sometimes living with colourblindness can feel like the world is just cruel, and other times it's completely unnoticeable. Where ordinary people differentiate with colour, colourblind people use situational clues without ever realising that's not what others do. It was years before I realised that £5 and £10 notes were different, or that Word uses a different colour for grammar and spelling mistakes. Many video games have colourblind modes now, and people are starting to realise that 5% of the world can't read their map. Computers have apps to help distinguish confusing colours, and developers are slowly catching up. Everybody knows someone who's colourblind, so why doesn't everyone know what colourblindness is? Find that person in your life and speak to them about it. Don't ask them to identify colours. You wouldn't ask someone with a speech impediment to try a tongue twister, but you can tell them that peanut butter isn't green and watch their goddamn minds explode. Or you could buy them corrective glasses. These are a pretty new invention that blocks out specific wavelengths where the cones overlap, forcing the brain to see difficult colours as more vibrant than before. I've got a pair on their way, so subscribe to see my next video where I'll explain how they work and my reaction to trying them for the first time.
Wow. I'm actually crying.
This is unreal.
Those are like really strong. I feel like I've been seeing hazy my whole life. It's so beautiful.
So interesting. And what gets me there is that the whole peanut butter. I don't know if some of you remember when Heinz tried to change the ketchup from red to green, and people flipped out about it. I know I didn't. I didn't like it. It was awkward. It was weird. And so it's something to think about, as we're designing and developing these email campaigns, both on the landing page and email perspective. And one way to think about it too is, the way I look at it is, when you think about disability, try to navigate your email and your landing page experience with your weaker hand. So if you're right-handed, try it do it in the left hand. You kind of see how easy it is. How far do you have to move your mouse? How do you have to interact with that email or that landing page? Okay, just a little exercise that you can go through to kind of say, okay, well, what would it be like? How would people interact with it? And so how do we get better at this? Like, how do we get better at accessibility and engaging? And there's a whole thing from HTML, it's called ARIA. And what it stands for is Accessible Rich Internet Applications. And what it does is it provides a way that we as coders or designers can add missing semantics needed to help assistive devices read the screen. And I'm going to kind of go through some of those. This is more important, kind of more relatable from a landing page perspective, but there are some concepts here that you can use in email, which I'll kind of go through here in a little bit. And the three things are roles, properties, and states. And so the roles describe the structure of the web page, such as headings, regions, and tables. And so here's kind of a quick example. Now, again, I don't feel like you have to write all this stuff down. The presentation will be available to you. So just real quickly, like, you can assign a div and then you have that role. And so you can define what that is, like what that represents. Now, this stuff has no impact on rendering from a visual side, both in email and on the website. However, it allows the screen reader to add context to it. And so what happens is when the screen reader reads this, the role attribute is prioritized over the implied role of the HTML element. So for example, that div had a role of banner. So when the screen reader reads that, it will read it as a banner. And I have some examples later about within email of the impact that can have. Now, properties support roles, often to describe the relationships between that element and other elements on the page and how they interact with each other. And they generally don't change. They're stateful, okay? So here's an example. You have a label of your birthday, and then you have the input of what day your birthday is. Now, if you don't have this ARIA describe by attribute on this, describing what format it is, the screen reader is not going to know. It's not going to know how to tell what user to tell them for what to put in that input field. And that is incredibly important, because if someone's using an input field and it says your birthday, they have no clue about what format you're expecting. If there's JavaScript that's blocking it, or it has to be a certain format, they're never going to get past that point. And so it's really important to think about this. Now, again, this isn't relevant in landing pages, in email, but really it's focusing on the landing pages, because again, you want to make sure it's a smooth transition. So if you're sending them an email that's accessible, you want to make sure and follow up that the landing page of where you're trying to convert them is also accessible as well, because it's kind of disjointed if you don't. And the next one is states. And so what this is, like, dynamic attributes. So when someone interacts with the element or with the page, it also changes the state of it. And the screen reader will read that state back to them. And so here's an example about a slider. So here's the div. The role is a slider. It has the ARIA values, the minimum, the maximum, and then the text. So as they move the slider, those values will change. And this is mostly done through JavaScript and that dynamic nature. However, it gives the person that's using the screen reader the understanding of what that interactive element is and what the value of it is as well. Now, I know, Keith, you guys have some stuff within your tool that allow people to do this type of stuff through your landing page creator. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah. In our new product, NextMail, you're able to design a grid system, just as you were talking about, and go in and actually edit the text and easily put in this ARIA values. Perfect.
Awesome. Cool. So now let's get into, now I'll give you some context about coding, ARIA and stuff. Let's talk about how we want to code for email to make it totally accessible. Now, I'm doing some high level stuff. I'm not going to get really deep in code, so don't worry about that. And I have some examples to tell you, like, the differences and the impact it will make. The first one, it's so simple. And all this stuff I'm going to talk about too has absolutely zero impact on renderability. So if you go and add this stuff or take it to your designer, this stuff will have zero impact on how it's rendered within the email client. Okay, and the first one, and a lot of this stuff we already do. The first one is defining the language attribute on the HTML tag. And this is so important. It's so easy to do. And so what I do is, let me just switch my mic, but I have an example in the next screen. And I might play it twice because it goes kind of quick. So bear with me. Give me 1 second.
L'eau monte au fur et à mesure de la fonte des neiges.
L'eau monte au fur et à mesure de la fonte des neiges.
L'eau monte au fur et à mesure de la fonte des neiges.
L'eau monte au fur et à mesure de la fonte des neiges.
So that first example, the first one didn't have an HTML attribute, and so it used my default language, which was English. So it interpreted that first line if it was English, whereas the second one, I had the French language attribute set to it, and you could tell the difference. You can see like the interpretation of it is completely different. And those language attributes can be in multiple tags within the page. So if you have a mixed language, you can actually have like a paragraph tag or a table tag or a div tag that defines what language is in, and then the screen reader will go and will read it as that. But again, if you're doing all English, put it at the very top. But if you have mixed, you can do it with all throughout, because that language attribute it's available in every single, pretty much every single HTML tag. Okay, it is such a little change can have such a big impact on the readability of the email. The next one is the title tag. Again, we do this in HTML all the time for two reasons. One, you can add more context to the email behind it, because again, it won't be displayed anywhere. And second, if they do the click to view in a browser or whatever, it adds it to the tab, and then the screen reader will read that as well. So again, it just allows you to add more context, and it's a very simple thing. We're already doing it in HTML web pages already, so let's do it in email. The second one is the table presentation, and this gets back to that example about the ARIA and adding that role equals presentation. Now with email, unfortunately, we're coding like we're in the 90s, where we have to use tables. A lot of email clients don't support standard divs and all that for block elements. And so you might build an email that might have 30 tables in it, right? 30 nested tables. And so this next example, I'm going to show you what the difference is, what the impact it has on just setting the role presentation. So give me a second, let me change my mic and we'll go to the next slide.
HTML content without role equals presentation. Group. Table 3 columns. 1 row. You are currently on a table. Blank. Column 1 of 3. You are currently on a table. Heading level 1. This is not very accessible. You are currently on a heading level 1 inside of a cell. Blank. You are currently on a table. End of table. You with role equals presentation. Heading level 1. This is much more accessible.
Wow, so this is just one table, or actually two tables stacked. But so the role presentation was not on the top one. See how it went through each one? It said table heading level 1, table row thus, but all that type of stuff to get to the content. So what tables are intended to do are more like tabular data, like Excel spreadsheet. And so when a screen reader reads that, it will go down and go through all that. So just think about if you had 20 nested tables or even 5, how long it would take to actually get to the content without having that role presentation. And so what role presentation does, it actually takes that, the screen will read it and say, okay, this presentation only, I'm going to go straight to the content. And it will save so much time. Even if this little example with this 2 tables, it was what, a third of the time that it actually went through it. So just imagine if you had those stacked. And again, this has absolutely zero impact on the renderability. And these are such easy wins that you guys can do to help those. Now, one thing I want to note too is that, like with this role presentation, is the fact that if you have any type of border on it, whether it's inline, a style, or whatever, it will discard the presentation and will go through and read down through all those individual table datas and table rows. So it's just something to consider when you're doing that. You're saying, hey, it's not working right. It's probably the fact that it has a border. Now we're trying to figure out a workaround for that, but we haven't found one yet. But we will keep you guys posted on that. The next one is image blocking. So this one is on twofold. One is for image blocking so that those with that can see it, get a good experience, and they understand what the context is. So this email from M&M's, I really like this email. However, unfortunately, they failed from an image blocking perspective and from an accessibility perspective. Because as you can see with images blocked there on the right, I have no clue about what the call to actions are with this in email? Like, I have no clue. I have no context around it. And from an accessibility standpoint, it's really, really bad, because what happens is if you don't have any alt tags on it, now it can be blanked out, but if you don't have any alt text, it will actually read out the source. So it will go http://www.emailandacid.com/ blah, 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 all the way down. And can you imagine how long it would take to get through this email? I know if I was listening to a screen reader, I would have jumped out within a minute, or maybe even less. And so what you want to do is just always make sure you include an alt attribute. And what it can be blank. So if you have a spacer, or if you have something that a visual element in your email that doesn't really add context, it's more for the visual, just have the alt text blank, because what happens on the screen reader will go right over it. Okay. And I'm gonna get into some more points about why I think alt text is so important here in a little bit as well. Okay. And when HTML, like, one of the big things is it used to be, it's kind of old now, but it was the title attribute. And putting title attributes on links or something, so when you hover over it, you have that little pop-up. Now, unfortunately, those things are incredibly bad from a screen reader perspective, because it confuses the screen reader, and the screen reader will jump around all over the place. So always, always, always avoid the title attribute. Just remove it. It's really not necessary, really not needed anymore within email, because most of the email clients don't support it anyway. Okay. Now that we've gone through the coding aspect of it, I want to talk to you about kind of the design side. What can we do from a design perspective to help those with visual impairments? And the first one is always try to test content scaled at 200%. And I know this one might be kind of difficult to do, but you can do it through Chrome or through a browser where you can click the Control plus or the Command plus sign. And what it will do is actually show you if the content's scaled up, because what happens is with those with visual impairments, using a tablet or something, will actually have it zoomed to 200% so they can read it. I was on the light rail here in Denver not too long ago, and I saw someone that had their iPad about, I don't know, I would say 4 or 5 inches from their face. And as I walked by, I could tell that it was scaled really high, but they obviously had a visual impairment. And so an example of that, of what can happen with that, is this. So this is an email from Marvel. On the left, it's 100%. On the right, it's scaled to 200%. And as you can see, the way they design the email, that's cropped off. Like, content gets cropped off. And so what happens if that's your main call to action? Guess what? They're going to miss out. They're not going to see it. They're not going to know it's even there. So again, something to be considered. Now, this one's maybe not a huge deal. I mean, from a legal perspective, maybe it is, but because this is in the footer, it might not be that big of a deal. However, though, if it's up higher, you always want to make sure that you understand that you're able to attract those customers. You're talking to those people that might not be able to see it or have it scaled to 200%. The next one is keeping fonts legible. Always make sure that you minimize, like, the minimum font size is 14 pixels. And with light fonts, which is super popular these days, it's 16. And a lot of this stuff is standards from a mobile design, like a mobile perspective. We just want to make sure we carry those over to anything we do, whether it's landing pages, emails, everything. And then contrast ratio. This is a big one. So what the standard, the WCAG standards are, is 4.5 to 1 for normal text, and large text is 3 to 1. Now, you're probably saying, okay, what does that mean? So same color, the way that they do it, the same colors are 1 to 1. So black and black is 1 to 1. In opposite colors, black and white, it would be 21 to 1. And so that gives you kind of some context into it. And what large text is 24 pixels or bigger, or if it's 18 pixels and bolded. Okay? And here's some examples that I have for that, about how you can see what passes, what not. And I really hope to God that no one out there listening to this is using the green or red on green, because that's just bad in general, because they're almost the exact same colors. But as you can see, some of these that you actually might think would pass, small text like the blue on orange, you might think from a visual perspective that passes, but from a standards, it doesn't. It does not pass. And so again, it's just something to be mindful of, and I'll go into a little bit later about some tools that you can use that can help you with this design process. This one is a really big one. So always making sure that you keep links underlined, or make sure that a link there's a visual identifier between what a link is. Because here's the deal. Remember when I talked to you guys about color blindness? The 3 main colors is what? Red, green, and blue. What's the default color for HTML for a link? It's blue. So if I can't see the color blue and I have text in some language that's not underlined, or there's a visual representation that I can click on it, I'm never going to see it. And that's really important. Now, I'm not saying you go and you make sure that every link is underlined, because I know there's that visual side of it, like, hey, it's not very pretty. But from an accessibility standpoint, it's incredibly important. So if it's a button, you don't need to keep it underlined. If it's a standard link inside of a body of text and it's not bold, italic, or some type of clear visual identifier that you can click on it, they're not going to click on it. You could be potentially missing out on a conversion. Really, really important. The other one is like maintain a logical reading structure. Now the support of H1s, the use of that in email is becoming more and more supported, and people are using it more. However, the thing that you really want to avoid is skipping headers. You don't want to go to have a header 1 and then a header 3. And I know that, you know, we're guilty of it at EOA of doing that sometimes, but we don't do it anymore because of the fact that the screen reader will get lost. It won't know where to go because it's expecting to say, hey, if I see a header 1, I'm expecting if I'm going to go to the next header, it's going to be a header 2. Now, if it gets a header 3, it doesn't know where to go and it gets confused, starts jumping around trying to find where to go. Okay, so if you're going to use heading tags, always make sure that they go in order and that you don't skip them. And here's what I was kind of talking about from a dyslexic standpoint is you really kind of want to avoid center alignment with large bodies of text. Because what happens is that example I showed you with dyslexia, it's really important that they have that some type of line or lineage that they can line words up to, and that there's a set point there. Because if it's centered, they're all different. There's not one set line, and so trying to read that becomes incredibly difficult. Now, am I saying never use center alignment? Not necessarily. I guess what my suggestion is, if you have more than 1 or 2 sentences, try to put some type of alignment on it, no matter what, because a big body of text like this will be really hard to read. And then from input notifications, always make sure that there's a very clear disbursement of when someone does something right or when someone does something wrong. So for example, if I don't have these visual identifiers, I'm not going to know. So if I don't have any text around it and the box is just green and I can't see that color, or if red, I can't see red. Again, it's one of the colors I can't see if I'm colorblind. I'm not going to know where the problem is when I try to submit a form. And again, this is for landing pages. I'm not going to know where the problem is, so I won't be able to continue, or it'll be very difficult for me to continue. And so again, always have some type of visual identifier, some words, some around where it is, and not just at the top and then have a color, because that's not going to help them really much either. Okay, it's a lot easier if it's around where it is. And with videos are widely used and incredibly popular these days. So you always want to make sure you include captions in the video. And there's a lot of free tools out there that will help you do this. And there's a difference between captions and subtitles. Subtitles are intended for translation and not sound. And so caption will actually show sounds like bang, pop, moving, shuffling, like outside noise, whereas captions just do the straight language translation. Okay, so there's a difference there. So captions is what you want to go for when you do videos. Now, what type of resources do you guys have with all this stuff, like from a visual standpoint, or if you're just curious about how you can become more accessible or create things that are more accessible? Web AIM is by far the most popular resource out there. This is a fantastic website. They have everything that you need to know about accessibility from a digital standpoint, contrast ratios, all that type of stuff. They have a plethora, a huge library of information, so I highly suggest going and checking that out. The other one is Wave, and so this is WebAIM's evaluation tool. So what you can do is you can use this tool and you can go plug in a landing page. If you have email that you have loaded up in a browser that's public accessible, you can put that HTML, that link in there, and it will actually rate you and tell you where you're missing or where something's broken or where the contrast ratio is off. It will go through all that stuff. A really, really powerful tool. What I'm really excited about, ever since Chrome version 60 and above, they have this audit tool directly within the browser itself. So you don't have to technically have to go to Wave anymore. You can just use this, pop this open, it's in the developer tools, and it will actually give you a grade on the accessibility side. And once you click on the accessibility, it would kind of break it down where you're passing and where you need improvement. So again, really handy tool because a lot of people use Chrome. And now that we're talking about, landing pages and all this type of stuff, I really want to kind of focus on mobile because this has opened up the world to those with some type of disability or visual impairment. And what I want us to think about is accessibility is not only about understanding how our users engage with our website, but how they engage with their devices. And it's really, really interesting. And I don't know if any of you guys have done this before and gone and turned on accessibility on your mobile phone. And if you haven't, I highly suggest you do. So with Apple, it's called VoiceOver. And for Android, it's called TalkBack. Now, Apple is, I personally think, way ahead of Android and TalkBack. However, what I would suggest you do is go and whatever phone you have, when you're traveling or you're bored, go and turn on accessibility and see what it's like to engage with that device. It's really, really interesting. Instead of using one fingers and taps, you're using 2 and 3 fingers, swipes and double taps, and all this different stuff. And for me personally, it was incredibly confusing and quite honestly frustrating when I was going through it. But now I have a better understanding of how people would engage with it. And that's what I kind of want to talk to you guys a little bit about now too, is how do you engage with it from a voice perspective? And I don't know how many of you have tried this, but Siri will actually read your emails to you. It's really super cool. And so what it does will actually read pre-headers. And so what happens is, so for those that aren't familiar, the pre-header text is simply that text below the subject line on mobile devices that really kind of give you as a marketer another opportunity to encourage your subscriber to open that email. It gives more context about what the email is about. And Siri will actually read this stuff. And so here's kind of a quick example as we go through it. And pre-header text is really kind of one of the easiest wins that you can ever have with an email. And it's probably one of the biggest missed opportunities that I see out there. Like, how many of you have seen in that pre-header text, if this doesn't open properly, click here, right? They're wasting an opportunity in that space. And it's really super easy because what happens is the email client will go and strip out all the HTML, and then they'll show whatever remaining text in that field up to whatever text character count that they want to show. And here's this quick example of how you do that. So that when the email is actually open, this is hidden from that open display. But the email client will take the content and put it in the pre-header text. And with Siri, like how it reads it is we'll say sender name, sent you an email about the subject line. It says, now we'll read out the pre-header, would you like to reply? And so in this next example, what I would like you to do is, and I know I can't see you, but just follow me on this one. Take a second, close your eyes, and just really pay attention to your auditory senses. And I just want you to sit there and think about it for a minute. And then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna start this next clip, and I want you to just be very diligent on keeping your eyes closed throughout the whole experience, because it'll be quite interesting. Okay, so take a minute, close your eyes, and then a couple seconds, I'll start the clip.
Email on Acid sent you an email about our latest email news. It says, learn which email marketing tricks drive us bonkers. Plus, Google email news and a guide to using images. Sign up free today, X6W49Z4P2MV0YJW7B7W6W7HYJW8Z. X6W49Z4P2MV0YJW7W8FRF6 Higgs1BQCJB6TFWWTW7ZLV652 and NQ5KW4B QW6C44WW1FP6YY46PBGDVRHTZJ1W0LW6HRFHS4BFMK6N67QC9RWXP6LVWHXTH6CQQS S9W7B1G4C1ZXLMZW2S. Would you like to reply?
Hell no, I don't want to reply. That was awful. Like, what the heck was that? So what essentially happened is Siri would go and it picked up the subject line and then it picked up the pre-header text. And what it did is it stripped out all the HTML except text and links. And it read our pre-header text up to that certain amount that we had, and then it read a link. It said homepage, and then it read out our URL, the href of that link. And so you guys just heard part of our HubSpot tracking link, which was a terrible, awful experience. Now, I'm going to play another example to give you guys an idea of how we can improve it and how we can make a better experience with it. So again, what I'd like you to do is close your eyes and let's listen to this next example.
Email on Asset sent you an email about our latest email news. It says, find out which common email marketing tricks drive us bonkers. Plus, learn about Google's email news and read a practical guide to using images in your email campaigns. This is the latest installment of our monthly newsletter, containing only the best in email news. We love hearing from our subscribers, so if you have any feedback about this email or our service in general, please feel free to reply to this email with your thoughts and feedback. We really would love to discuss them with you. Would you like to reply?
Much better. So I'm assuming a lot of you guys would probably reply to that one versus the other one. And so this is what I want to challenge you guys on going forward from here on out. Is pre-header text, make it long. So what Siri does is it picks up 500 characters. So if you can have your pre-header text 500 characters, you get this awesome experience from Siri. And what's great about this is that all the other pre-header text options that you have, like there's some hacks that you can do to make it shorter. What Siri will do is actually skip over those because those are HTML. And then you can read the content. So if you wanted just the first sentence in there and use that hack, like there's HTML hacks out there, so that's only what displays. Then when Siri reads it, you get all of this content. And the beauty of that is this stuff is hidden anyway. And so why not create that better experience and add more context? And just think, you might actually be able to convert someone through an email. And we've done some tests on this. So some of our campaigns that we've done, we've actually put things in there like, hey, if you're hearing this on Siri, we'll send you, let us know, we'll send you a $25 gift card. And we got some really interesting results from it. And so you can say, hey, Siri, read my last email, or hey, Siri, read me, the last 5 messages from John, or whatever. You can do things like that now when you're driving or whatever. Now, hopefully you're not doing it in a place where you're not super multitasking, but you can actually talk to Siri. And speaking about talking and like all this other stuff, how many of you out there have a smart speaker? And these things are driven by accessibility technologies. We wouldn't have this convenience if it wasn't for the technologies by accessibility. I remember back in college doing a whole report about dictation and doing Dragon Speak. And back then it was not good. I'm not going to tell you when, because then I'll just age myself, but it was not good. It was really hard, but now it's so much better. And it's all because of the tools and the technologies driving accessibility. And these smartphones, these are the fastest growing consumer product in the world right now. It's supposed to almost double this year in sales from these devices. Now, as you can see from this graph, that Echo has the biggest share of the market, but Google Home is following fast. So why am I talking to you guys about this when we're talking about email? Well, this is what gets me so excited about the future of email. Now, is it going to be the only thing that does it? But this is what I see. I see us developing auditory call to actions and be able to convert someone directly from an email. No longer are we reliant on someone going to a landing page and email being a driver, but actually a conversion tool. Think about that. Think about Siri. Think about if you have a sales thing or if you send something out, do you want to reply? And they're totally dictating to you. They can dictate what they want. Like they can talk to you about, yes, I want that offer, sign me up. So you can actually potentially, if you already know the consumer or the subscriber's information, if it's subscription-based or whatever, you can actually convert them right there through email. And that's what gets me so excited. And what's even better, I don't know if you guys have, those of you have Google Home, but you can actually say, hey, Google, read me last email. And guess what it says? I don't know how to do that yet. And that yet word gets me so excited because that auditory call to action, it's coming, it's happening. Now, is it going to happen tomorrow or next month or in 2 months? Probably not. But I bet over a course of the year or a course of a period of time, we're going to be able to do that. We're going to actually be able to read and engage with emails from these auditory devices, like using our voice. We're already kind of doing that with Echo. Like, hey, Echo, order me some eggs, and it will do it for you. The same type of thing will happen with email. Now, are we still going to have that visual side? Absolutely. I'm not saying that we won't, but we're also going to have this other opportunity for you as marketers to engage and to try to convert people, or actually convert people through email. And that's what gets me so excited about this whole process. And that's where I think, when I talk about alt text, right? I want to challenge you guys to think about how you guys can create auditory call to action. I think alt text is a great way to do it, is describing a picture with words. And it helps from an accessibility standpoint, but it also helps you guys in trying to think about using words with no visual elements to help you to do it. How are you going to do that? And how can you possibly convert someone through an email? And that's what gets me so excited about this whole concept, and how accessibility and the importance of accessibility and how it's actually driving our behaviors as consumers. Now that's my presentation. That's what I got for you. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Now I think we'll open it up for some questions.
Yeah, John, great job. I'm excited to see what's going to happen with Alexa and Google Home myself. But we do have we have a number of questions from the folks, so I want to make sure we get to those. So we have a couple of questions about the presentation, the role tag with presentation in there. The first question was, is the presentation tag a command for these speaking devices?
It's not a command, but it, like I mentioned, like for ARIA, so what those roles, that takes precedence over what the actual tag is. So if you have a role there, the screen reader will take that as precedence and not see it as a table, but see it as a presentation element, like a visual element. And so that's how it's able to skip over it. And so it's not really a command, it's just telling the reader what it is, like what object it is.
Okay. And if to add these roles and presentations, you would go into the HTML editor of your email provider, right? So like, here in Atlantic or MailChimp or any of those, you would have to go into the HTML editor, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. So that's actually in the code.
And is the role tag, does it need to be nested in each table, or can it be in the outer table itself?
Great question. It has to be in every single table. Because if you do the top one, it will see that as a presentation, then it will go down and see, oh, I have a table, then it will start reading through that. So it has to be in every single table. It's not inherited down through the children, so it has to be inherited through every table.
Another question here from Brett is asking what the font size, what are the best practices for font size in a footer or disclaimer legal copy?
That's a good question. For those, I know that there's like HIPAA compliance, that you have to have it like a certain height, a certain text length. But again, I think if from that side, that's a tough one. I know that a lot of people like to keep those small. A screen reader will read those regardless. I don't know. That's a tough one. I could go both sides on saying, hey, make it bigger, but then on the design side, is that something that you want to focus on? So I think that's kind of a judgment call.
Okay. And I know you covered it here, but Carol Ann and David are asking what are the best methods for testing emails out to make sure that they can that they meet some of these accessibility requirements?
So you can use those online tools like the Chrome, stuff like that. And so what happens is it's not really, so the screen readers will read it kind of email client independent. So it looks at the kind of the code and behind it to read it. So there's not really a rendering thing, but we do have something that we are actually developing right now that's in a private beta, that everything that we talked about here, we have a tool that would go through, assess it, and actually make the corrections for you without having to know HTML. But until that's fully released, you can use like kind of the Chrome auditor or the Wave application.
Okay. Now the PJ and Kara here are asking also about justification in text. So obviously not wanting to have a center alignment for longer text, but should it be full justification or just left justified? What would be the best practice for that?
I think it kind of depends on what your audience is. And what I mean by that is like different languages are right justified. I think what you do is you just go with the default language style. So like us, like for English, I would definitely do left justified from a because that's what the standard is when you read a book and all that type of stuff. I would use whatever standard for that language.
And Brent also had another question about desktop Outlook. Is there would these testing services be able to help him see how his emails would render for normal vision and the accessibility requirements in the Outlook desktop app?
That's a good question. So it's my understanding most of these screen readers like Shark and all those types of things, it's email client independent. So if it's the same accessibility standard as it reads it. Now from a visual standpoint, we currently do not have that kind of that look about the different views like of a different type of color impairment within our rendering. But again, if it depending on how it renders, like whether it's mobile responsive or whatever, I think you can get the same type of thing and there's actually Chrome extensions out there that will actually mimic what it's like to have those type of visual impairments that you can use, like you can install. And so when you're viewing a page or your landing page or email within a browser, you can actually see kind of how that's interpreted.
All right, and Ryan has a question about deliverability. If you're using these tags, the accessibility tags in your email, does that help with inbox delivery or getting through some spam filters?
Right now, it does not. So I don't think that they are, like the ISPs are actively looking at that. Now that could change as it starts to become more apparent, more like known issues and something that we should be more aware of. They could penalize you for it not being accessible. But for right now, I am not aware of any ISP or spam filter that will negatively flag your email because it's not accessible.
And Anna's got a follow-up to that. If you're using these accessibility tags, in the past, it was our understanding that they would use the plain text version for the speak-to-text functions. Does adding these accessibility tags, does that replace the need for having a plain text version of an email?
So here's the thing, that the screen readers that we've tested, they do not read the alt text. So what it does is actually reads what's visible on the screen and the code that's running that. And so from an alt text perspective, this is a question I get a lot too, is like from a deliverability standpoint, it has actually no impact on deliverability either. We've run several tests with that through our spam testing platform, and we've seen no negative impact from either having it or not having it. Now, it will tell you from a branding perspective, just like we're talking about accessibility and being able to communicate to every subscriber, no matter where they're viewing it, I would always put the alt text in there no matter what. No matter what. The reason is there's so many free tools out there. We have one, there's tools out there online that will take your HTML and it takes like 5 minutes to create it. There's maybe NetAtlantic even has a tool that does that within your application. I would always put it in there because you never know where your email is being opened or how people are doing it. And there's no way to track who's viewing it text only or who's not, because it's impossible to track that. I would always just put it in there. It doesn't hurt and it takes very little time to do it.
All right. We have another question here about PDFs or other attachments. Are there any advice for attaching a PDF or other document to help those with visual impairments?
Yeah, so that's a whole nother, like not from a deliverability or whatever, but just from a straight accessibility perspective, that's a whole nother topic, right? And that's taking these same concepts, but actually doing the design of it for anything that you send out. And yeah, I think that these same things hold true from the design stuff that I talked about. Now the code, like PDFs, there's not really like backing code to that, but from a design perspective, no, I'm not exactly sure how a screen reader reads PDFs. I've never really actually looked into that. It's something I can do. But I do think from a design perspective, we need to have the same thing like alignment and color contrast and all those types of things carry forward, not just an email, but anything that we create from a design perspective.
Excellent. We seem to have a number of folks that are really interested by the auditory call to actions, and we've got one question that's coming out that says that's asking, since Siri can read 500 letters out loud, do you have any idea what the Android talkback feature, how long or how many characters that system will speak?
So right now, we have not been able to figure out how to get talkback to actually read an email. And so that's one I like, we have not been able to figure that one out. So I don't think that technology is there yet. And if someone knows about it, I would love to hear it, because we have not been able to hear about it. By just saying, hey, Google, read mail, last email, the phone doesn't know what to do with that.
Excellent. Well, it sounds like it's a Wild West going out there, but technology, of course, is progressing. So,
yeah, absolutely.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, John, for giving this presentation, and thank you to everybody that showed up. If you want more information, please visit Email on Acid's website at emailonacid.com or netatlantic.com, and the recording will be heading out to you within the next day.
Awesome.
And thank you again, John.
Thank you, everyone.